This is the Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots podcast, where we'd explore the design, development, and business of great products. I'm your host, Chad Pytel.
And I'm your other host, Will Larry.
And that just leaves me to return as your other host, Sami Birnbaum.
Thanks for joining me, guys.
Yes, I'm excited. I love our chats. I'm sorry I never tell you that. That's one of my things in life. If you think something, you need to say it, especially when it's positive. I feel energized when I leave from our conversations. They're funny. They're just I have a good day usually when I leave. So I just want you to know I enjoy our chats and I enjoy being
It's
here
it's
chatting with y'all.
it's funny you say that because I mean the listeners we got a lot of messages in on socials and stuff. They want to know where I've been because I wasn't on the last couple of episodes that we recorded. Um, and I actually listened back to a few of those, and for some reason, like you didn't mention me at all, or say that you missed me. Um,
We have object or lack of object permanence here, Sammy. So when something's not here or when someone's not here, it's like they don't even exist.
Yes. And I have no idea. I kind of know why you're missing, but since I'm in America, I have no idea why you're missing.
Fair enough. And to be fair, there's been like a lot of there's a lot of rumors out there on the internet about where I've been. And I
Oh,
think it's important to address some of those because a lot of people thought that I've been hired by or Spotify to
Really?
host. Yeah. A lot of people have wondered like because they see that I'm a bit of an influencer in this space, and so
oh,
they have I done
sweet.
a like there's questions, have I done a breakaway podcast?
Right. Giant
Um,
robots smashing into the giant robots 2 with TOO.
yeah. It was actually going to be little robots smashing into other little robots as my breakaway. But no, I'm around. I'm back. It was just more of a logistical nightmare of trying to get us all together.
Yeah.
Um, but I would like go listen to episode 600 as well, the special one, because then you'll also understand why
Mm,
maybe I needed a bit of a break because that was intense. But I'm
Yeah, that
happy
was
to be
epic.
back. I'm happy to
you
be
did a
back
great
in
job.
this. Thank you.
And thank you for the kind words, Will. I appreciate it. And it's always great to chat with you as well.
Yeah.
So today we are going to talk about a exciting new thing that we're going to be doing at thoughtbot. We are starting a new product, and it's been years since we officially started on what we believe is going to be a new product.
Oh, wow.
And in the past, um, we except for our books, we didn't develop the products out in the open. And so that's going to be a little bit different this time in that we are going to be starting to develop the product out in the open, including the source code. Um, and it's going to be primarily in public on the other show that I do, AI in Focus, because the application that we're going to build is a rapid application development tool that creates Ruby on Rails applications. A lot like if you're familiar with Lovable, um, and we can talk about what is good about Lovable and what's not so great about Lovable and the reasons why we're going to be creating this tool. But if you're familiar with that, it's an application that lets non-technical people rapidly build web apps using prompting and natural language. And so we're going to be doing the same thing, similar thing, but it's going to be creating awesome Rails applications, full backends with great security from day one. That's the goal, anyway.
Sweet.
That's cool. That sounds good. Do we have a name? Like, what can we call this thing as we refer to it? I don't want to. I don't want
I
to
think
just
we
keep
should
running it
call
for
it the
like. Okay.
generator for this show, or the app generator. We are still working on a name, and when we have a name, we will make a real announcement about it. So
Okay.
today on the stream, we've done a little bit of pre-planning and planning, but we're actually starting pretty much from scratch on the stream today that we're recording. So Richard and I are going to go over all the features and functionality and requirements and everything
Mm.
live on the stream. We're going to do card sorting and sort on a Fig Jam board everything and identify what we believe is the MVP.
Okay.
And that'll build a backlog, and it'll also help us say, okay, here's what we're going to do on the next episode, and then we'll actually get into feature development. Uh, but that gives us a ticking clock of 1 week, because by the next episode, next Thursday, we need to create the repo and start
Mm.
actually creating the app. So that'll be the ticking clock. We'll need to settle on a name uh, by then, unless we want to do a rename at some point, which isn't impossible, but I would like to avoid it.
Yes.
So if you've got any name suggestions, uh, throw them out.
Yeah, it sounds really well. Can I tell you what I think a feature should be? Because what
Yeah.
bothers me about I don't know if the other ones do this or not, but something which
Hmm.
always appealed to me. You have this, I think, and will correct me on this if I'm wrong. When you build something in React Native, you have the ability to eject, and I
Hmm.
believe that means you can
Hmm.
get the native code of like Swift
Yeah.
or Kotlin or something like that.
Yep.
So I don't know if these other platforms have that, but what I think is so important is that you can build what you can with AI, but you get to a point where you're able to almost eject from the platform and then either take ownership of the code or at least see the code,
Yeah.
and the code is then able to be worked with. So that's really important, that the
Yeah.
code base that it writes is actually readable and resilient
Right.
to change.
Yeah. So Lovable does have that feature. You can get the code out and you can sort of eject. But and we plan on doing the same thing. It'll be an actual Rails app. I expect that it will be in a Git repo, or in a Git repository from day one. So you'll have also the entire history of everything that you've done in the application automatically saved. But that sort of brings us to one of the big things that we think we can do here, which is we see a lot of people using Lovable to generate a prototype of their application or their first application. And even though you can get at the code, um, one, there are typical sort of big things missing because it primarily comes from the standpoint of making a prototype or something that's clickable rather than fully functional. And admittedly, Lovable has gotten better. You can do a backend in Supabase and stuff like that now, but things like security, permissions, role, like you don't really have a lot of that stuff built in unless you know enough to take the time to do it. And I think that using our experience creating Rails applications, we can basically build that in from day one, um, in terms of the kinds of things that we would do when building an application that we build from day one, so that you're not building a throwaway application, but when you're using this tool you can have something that thoughtbot would actually be able to pick up and continue to develop. And that's the thing. Not only is it a tech stack thing, Lovable is generating JavaScript front ends talking to like a Supabase backend, which isn't really the kind our default stack, but
Yeah.
also the code isn't always something that we can pick up and be able
Mhm.
to work on for various reasons, like lacking security, or it would require so much effort to fix the problems in that code base that it makes sense to start over in Rails anyway. And so we believe that we have something to bring to the table where we can create something better from day one with one of these tools, but also be creating something that we could then do full custom development on. So I think the target for this tool is someone who's somewhat technical, like a product founder who has an idea, who's somewhat technical, people who are using Lovable right now, and then coming to us and saying, I'd like to work with thoughtbot to continue this. That would be the start of it. And then likely we would take that and we wouldn't continue to use the tool. We would use our editors and Claude Code and our normal workflows, because I think if we set the target for this product of being as good as Claude Code and wanting us as
Yeah.
developers to use it, we're setting ourselves up as a losing battle, because they have so much resources and we
Yeah.
like to use our editors as well. So I think a better target is we'll use it ourselves during the design sprint to do rapid prototyping and to load in all the things we've learned about the product and the product plans and the requirements documents to be able to rapidly create the first prototype of the product, but to not have it be a throwaway prototype, have it to be a
Okay.
Rails app that is fully functional, database backed, that we're then able to basically eject from that post sprint and continue development on in our regular editors and workflows and all that kind of stuff.
Sweet.
So in a way, is that kind of like similar to the suspenders gem that we have? So the suspenders gem is kind of like gives us boilerplate
Mhm.
for
The
how we like to
ability to
build it.
make
Yeah,
a new Rails app in the way that we want, configured the way that we want really quickly.
yeah,
Yes, we're going to use suspenders, or I anticipate we're going to use suspenders in this application,
Okay.
but
right.
um,
But this will go a
it's going
level
to be much
further.
more than that,
Yeah, yeah.
because in order for a non-technical person to generate a Rails app, we have a lot of considerations to make in terms of, we need a server side. Rails is a server side framework. One of the reasons why Lovable doesn't need to deal with some of the things that we're going to need to deal with is because it's able to just generate a React app and run in the user's browser.
Yeah.
And that's it. It just is it's a React app by default. The React app has state but has no backend
But
by
Yeah.
then
default.
what is this thing that you mentioned? Subpar, sub base.
Oh,
What's the
super
back
base.
end?
Supabase.
Super base
Supabase
is
is
what
a
is that?
it
Yeah.
started as a Firebase clone, which is Google's like backend services,
So it's like database as a
including a
service.
database.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's since forked from Firebase, and it does different things differently than Firebase does, but it is essentially Postgres wrapped in APIs for storing data.
Yeah. It's not the easiest to use. You have to really be familiar with it, and it's not as easy as calling an endpoint, in Rails and letting it do the whatever it does. So yeah.
So if we decide this app generator is going to be a web-based thing that we want people to use, then we really need to generate the Rails backend in a container, which is exclusively for running that application and sandboxed for against all other generated applications on the platform. So we could go that route. I suspect that we're not going to go that route on the first version. That what we're going to do is have an app that you run locally that runs a container. So you don't need Ruby on your computer. You don't need anything. It
Mm.
um, it's a like a Mac app or a desktop application like Claude Code that you download and you run, but it gives you uh, it starts up a container with a full Rails development environment inside of it, and then generates the applications inside of that container, running SQLite or Postgres database and all that stuff.
Okay.
So we have that challenge when it comes to creating a server side application. Like I said, Lovable just creates a, a front end that by default is it has state. So while you're using it, it looks like it's saving everything. But if you refresh, you lose everything
Yeah.
that has done.
It's the perfect prototype.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
for now they've made it so that you can make real applications using back end services and everything, but it starts uh, from a prototype, which
Yeah.
we can do in our app generator as well. And we'll refine these workflows, but it's possible that we'll end up on the first pass just creating HTML stimulus, uh, talking to Rails controllers. So routes and controllers and clickable through screens and everything is there. And then models and everything get layered on after. We'll see what that flow ends up being. Um, and then the other important thing is we practice test driven development. If someone were to
Mhm.
come to us with a first version of the application that's a Rails app with screens and databases and controllers and models and all that stuff, but no tests, uh, that's going to present a challenge for us to rapidly be able to continue development of that. So, another important thing that we're hoping to achieve with this, which is not going to be easy, is to have it backed by a full test suite as well.
It's ambitious.
It's ambitious. It's probably the most. So Thoughtbot has created 12 products over the course of our 23 years. I dare say that this is probably the most ambitious product of them all.
You could even say it's a little bit bold, couldn't you?
You might say it's a little bit bold.
It's
Love it.
what's really interesting to me is, okay, so I imagined an interface that was going to be a web-based interface that would spin up a Rails app
Hmm.
that almost anyone could use. But the first iteration, it kind of makes more sense in that it's more sandbox to your local machine, and therefore you build something which runs locally. What is the benefit of that over, let's say, something like Claude code, which has perhaps context of how Thoughtbot likes to build things?
The benefit is that for a non technical person, they would need to put those pieces together. So they would need to install um, all of Ruby and all our entire Ruby development environment, Postgres, any additional services that are needed. They would need to install Claude Code. They would need to install whatever skills and
Right.
and and everything that we would make available, and they would need to piece all that together uh, by hand and be able to do that. And then they would need to know how to, like, if they wanted to do test driven development, for example, how to do that using those tools. It's not impossible, but I think hopefully describing it, you can see where if we can pull this off, it leaves that person in a way where they can get up and running quickly to create something meaningful that is a real production application that can actually go beyond the prototype stage in a
Yeah.
meaningful way.
I do think we have an advantage here with using Ruby on Rails because it's a mature framework.
Hmm.
This is completely anecdotal in my own head, but I believe that it makes sense that the models should have been trained or have more access to kind of Ruby code and that
Yeah.
convention over configuration principle.
Yeah, I think so. And actually it's, Node has been around for a long time as well, but what
Mhm.
helps us with Rails is the convention over configuration. There are very strong Rails conventions that have been written about and blogged about and are evident in open source products and all that stuff. And that's really not there with Node in the same
Yeah.
way. So the tools are good at creating Node applications, but I do think you're right that the structure of Rails and the
Yeah.
standardization of Rails makes it uh, so that we can sort of put guardrails on this application in a way that generates good quality code that we would be proud to pick up and continue to work on, which I think
Yeah.
is the bar we're shooting for.
Yep. Will it be open source? I think you said that.
So the idea is we're going to work in public. It will be the code will be on GitHub. We'll talk about it on the stream today. I think it will be open source. I think the core will be open source. And if we in the future decide to commercialize it, there might be like a commercial productized wrapper around it or add-ons or that kind of thing. Because I
Okay.
do want us to be able to work in public and to have community contributions. Because I think hopefully some other Rails people out there will be excited by this possibility and want to contribute. Um, but I do think we need to keep the possibility open that there is value here that people will pay for. So we'll probably do
Yeah.
like a hybrid model.
Yeah, I agree with that because I know our last chat we were talking about how people are bringing these prototypes and it's like you could build on top of it. Let's just take it and go. And you're like, no, let's just break it down, start all over, and this will save a lot of headache,
Mhm.
a lot of pain, a lot of money. Just doing it the right way. And
Yeah.
I agree with you with the guardrails. Like, notice though, Wild Wild West, like you could do it any way you want to with that. Rails, and that's something with learning Rails is like there's a structure to it. Like, I think of all the apps that I've been in, there's been one um that was different and they had packs
Mhm.
instead of the traditional Rails like
Mhm.
format. And that threw me because I was like, whoa, like I see the code, but the structure is different. Like this is totally different. So yeah, I think I love the idea. I think it's gonna be good stuff.
Yeah, and the other way we could potentially productize it is that, we do the initial infrastructure and the local version, but then that gives us the capability to make a web-based cloud version where
Mm,
sandbox containers are being spun up for users on a server. There's a Git server running, and it's all happening from their web browser, but against our servers.
yeah.
I'm skeptical about that being the first version.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that with Richard on the stream, but I'm skeptical about that
Yeah.
being the first target.
And I'm guessing this would be with a Rails, I guess a Ruby on Rails interface. It won't be like a API only back end with React or anything front end. It will be just strictly
I think that's what we're going for is Stimulus and Hotwire and Turbo being the
okay.
default. And I think that's what we're gonna go for.
Okay.
It's almost like I don't know if the listeners remember episode 579 where we spoke about products you don't want to build with Sammy and Chad. So there might be a little bit of revenge in this, but it is the perfect tool to build my theme park queuing app, which I know you're a big fan of.
Yes.
But just to push back a little bit. So
Yes. Love it. Go ahead.
do like is there a concern here though over almost like going back into a little bit of waterfall development? So one of the things which I feel is really helpful when I'm developing is almost just the fact that it takes me time means that as I go through the motions of feature after feature, I start to think about like actually that probably should be different or that wouldn't work. And it's almost like pause for thought. And do we end up here with I don't know what the end product, I don't know if you're looking to have like it's a single prompt or a bit more of a
Mhm.
paragraph or longer, but do we end up with a concern over people go back into waterfall development and end up building the wrong thing?
I think that's a really good question. I
Yeah.
think our primary so when we think about how we would use it, and I think it's important for us to let's take a step back. This is going to be a little bit longer of an answer, but we at Thoughtbot we've created these 12 products over the course of the years. Some of them have been more successful than others, but the clear pattern has been if we can find something that we would actually use, then that's a really great target because it means that we're actually using it. So we work on it, we see where it could be better, and then we make changes, and then we actually use it again in our real work. And it creates a virtuous cycle that creates something good. And so the place for us to do that with this product is clearly the product design sprints that we do, and the what would normally be a Figma prototype, or now we're
Mhm.
using Claude Code to generate prototypes, guided by a senior Rails developer. So I think if we and the inputs to that are really thought through sketches, requirements, gathering ideas, where
Mm.
we're mapping out a critical path and we're testing it. And the goal is to test it with real users, to get something that we can test with real users as quickly as possible, in just a couple of days. So the surface area of that target and what we're trying to do there, uh, isn't that we're just spewing out a bunch of stuff and then never testing or validating that we're headed in the right direction for our product. Um, it is to test that with real users, validate that we're headed in the right direction, and then by using this tool, instead of having a throwaway prototype, we'll have something that we can continue to build on and bring to production. So for someone who's non-technical, who's just downloading this app for the first time and isn't working with us to do a design sprint, um, I think there is a little bit of that risk there, in that
Yeah.
you just, um, you know, build a whole bunch of stuff all at once, and it's way too much and it's not the right thing. And I think where we can provide value in the product is providing product level guidance built, or workflows built into the product itself, that encourages people to work in the way that we would want, or that we would
Okay.
say is most successful. And I think that is breaking it down into steps, identifying like the first best thing to use, or to begin with. So, I have lots of ideas for this, and I don't know what will be an MVP and what not. But you can actually imagine that instead of just getting started by prompting to build something right away and having the tool go off and just, yes, you just told me to build something, I'm building it right away, that we actually bake in some of our product knowledge to this. And the first thing you do is not prompt to build something, but prompt to have a conversation about the thing that you want to build. And
Mm.
that the agent is saying, that's a cool idea. Have you thought about this? Let's identify the first feature that we're going to build. We know we want to build in vertical, typically want to build in vertical slices. So maybe find the first vertical thing that we can build. If we can have a conversation with the user to identify the thing that they can build that's going to make them not only most successful from a technical perspective in the flow, but from a product perspective as well, that would be really cool.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most valuable things that would be in the product is that part, that true design sprint. Because I was thinking the
Mhm.
same thing as Sammy is like, are we just gonna let someone loose with this tool? And then like I was like, ooh, that's gonna be scary.
Right.
Because
Right.
you just if you're non-technical or even if you're not a developer, I could see you go off the rails really quick,
Right.
pun intended.
Right.
But I like how you said prompting them through the design
Right.
sprint is key. So yeah.
So and I don't know I don't know that it will even take a ton of time, but like even just slowing down and asking a series of like like, tell us about your product, who's the primary user,
Oh,
what's the main value proposition, like just collecting a little bit of that information, um could be really, and then doing some quick exercises around that, could be really meaningful.
Yeah. Even the question, what you just said, who's your primary user? I've
Hmm.
seen a lot of business owners, a lot of technical, non-technical, like not know that, and they try to enclose everything, and it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's good.
But putting my business hat on for a
Yeah.
second, yeah, which I don't put that hat on often. It's a little bit dusty. Um,
Exclusive. Let's do it.
I've been no, I tell you what I've been reading, which has been really fascinating, is so software as a service has been around for kind of a long time, and one of the
Hmm.
ideas behind that is, your 10,000th customer won't cost you any more than your first customer.
Hmm.
Now, there's nuances in there in terms of scale, etc., but the theory remains kind of the same. But because with a lot of products now that use AI, right?
Yeah.
Every customer costs you in terms of tokens,
Yeah.
and so there's an increased cost. So, is that something which we have to consider, or you've had to consider around how cost effective this sort of product would be?
It's definitely a consideration, and that's actually why we're looking at not for the first version potentially, but if we're already committing to running product, a thing locally, and we're already running a container with Rails apps and
Mhm.
everything locally, then we could also use a local model running
Ah,
on the Rails computer.
interesting. That
And
that would
so
be
the
something
thoughtbot
cool.
team members have been doing a lot of experiments with running local models for Rails development, and some results are better than others. But it is definitely possible.
That would be really interesting. So you're spinning up in some sort of Docker container, you're downloading a model off Hugging Face open source model,
Hmm.
and then running it locally.
That's interesting. Hmm.
That's very cool. And then something else which pops into my head. So I have an analogy in my head, and I want you to break this down, and I'm sure you'll find a lots of faults in it. But imagine if I owned a lemonade stand, as one might,
Yep.
and my expertise is creating the lemonade. So that involves the water that's required, the lemons that's required, and the copious amounts of sugar. What I then decide to shift to is, instead of me producing lemonade, I'm going to sell these lemonade kits that allow other people to go and
Hmm.
create lemonade. Do I run the risk of becoming a victim of my own success? What does my lemonade stand look like when I hand over the ingredients to other people?
If we're successful creating something that is that valuable to people, that's I think a great success. And I think that means we have a product that people will be willing to pay for. Um, so that would be my first take on that. But second, I don't think we're going to be able to create something, or the target isn't to create something that you can use that will actually serve you forever. Um, it really is that first version.
Mm.
I think that to create something meaningful beyond that prototype version that you can then build up, that an experienced developer would be proud to take over and continue to develop, that's the target. um I don't I don't know that you can really take these kinds of tools currently through these interfaces much much further than that.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, because the internet will tell you otherwise. And then
Hmm.
there's a lot of hype at the moment. I say at the moment, there's been hype for the last 3 years. Will someone please stop the hype? Um, but yeah, as an actual developer who's kind of working with these tools daily, I'm also struggling to see how it gets past that step of being like, just this is a first prototype which I can iterate upon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we
Well,
kind of,
and that's
yeah.
it. So I've been doing this AI and focus stream for a while, and we got on a good topic with people who are watching. Lewis and I were going through this, and then Moses and I did it as well, where we were doing this with the tools we use now. We did a product design sprint. We're rapidly creating the Rails app, and people were saying, oh, you're not, what you're doing is not vibe coding. So we were doing full test driven development, creating a real application that can go to production. But we were doing it way faster than we normally would, supported by these
Mm,
tools. And I think that's the distinction, is that if you start from a place of I'm just vibe coding something, you get to a point where it really starts to break down. The application just becomes this nest of mess.
yeah.
But if we can bake into this tool that it's not just vibe coding, it is working in the way that a thoughtbot person would, and that's the agent itself doing that, then we can get to the point where, you know, that we end up with a prototype that's not just a prototype, but it is a fully backed test driven Rails application that can be then taken further by basically ejecting at that point and working in full development tools.
Yeah, I've struggled recently with the productivity gains. I know this is kind of
Mhm.
shifting that conversation a little bit, but just as you mentioned that you were kind
Yeah.
of coding and you were doing something which you were able to do much faster, I've really struggled with seeing the productivity gains when using Claude Code in a Ruby on Rails context where I'm quite proficient in the
Hmm.
framework. The way I take on like feature work is like we spoke about vertical slices.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not getting that
Yeah.
promise of
You're
like
not working
this.
on a greenfield application, right? Uh,
Um,
so so
I
actually let me you are working on a greenfield application technically, but
I technically
uh,
I am.
it's an
Yeah.
existing code base that has been weeks in development. And I think that is the part where there's diminishing returns, and that's what you're seeing.
Um,
But when you start from just the idea with a blank suspenders new, Rails new, there's so much still like uh there's so much low hanging fruit in terms of generating the views, controllers, models, that kind of thing, that someone who doesn't know what to do, a non-technical person, you know what to do. um, but a non-technical person or even an experienced developer, it still takes time to do all those things. So there's a lot of low hanging fruit when you're starting from zero. That's where I think the core value that we're sort of helping with is here.
So this stream where you went really fast, you were working from zero,
Yeah. Yeah. We
and there
were
you
taking
yeah.
we were coming out at a design sprint. So we had captured everything from the design sprint in markdown files, and then we were starting we created the repo and we started a Rails app from scratch, from zero.
And was the Claude Code or whichever tool you used that then created views, controllers, and models for you that got you to a prototype, or was it able to kind of like use like object oriented design and how far was it able to go?
Guided by me, it was able to do everything. The
Right, so you
trick
were
will be with
reading it.
this is
Yeah.
whether we can bake that in to the tool itself, that
Mm.
guidance. And I don't know.
yeah.
I think that's an unknown. Um, and yeah, I think that's an unknown.
Yeah, that was the question I was going to bring up is how do you put Rails put some guardrails on it, but how do you put the true guardrails on like I need you to stay in this lane, don't go
Yeah,
off and do
yeah.
all this junk.
So we've created a Claude MD file that does pretty well for
Okay.
thoughtbot best practices and for that, but that is something, even like, so that says always do test driven development, always write the test first, run the test to make sure that they pass or fail before. So we've got that and it does it, but then an hour into working with it, it forgets that, right?
Yes.
So I think we need to solve that problem. My idea, which we'll see how this goes, but basically is to use a technique that's generally referred to as like LLM as judge or monitor.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we'll have like the thoughtbot agent sitting on the other agent's shoulder watching
Oh,
what it's doing with another set of basically core rules and saying like check to make sure that the agent that's doing the work is doing the work according to these core rules, and if not, get it back on track. So this is like a
interesting.
proven technique, but I don't know that it's going to work for like keeping test driven development on track, for example, but I'm
Yeah.
optimistic.
Okay. No, that's I've never heard of that, so that's pretty cool. But I've dealt with 1 hour in amnesia. It's like,
Yes.
didn't we just talk about this? Like these are the rules. Like, oh,
Yeah,
you're
the best
right.
is when you're
Okay.
like when you do that, it's like, "Oh, you're absolutely right."
Yes.
I had that this morning. I had that this morning with Claude Code because I'm working a bit on React Native, and I've told it that I am a Ruby on Rails developer, but I'm trying to learn React Native as we go along and we code together. So I need you to explain every single line of code, what it is, what it does. Tell me the syntax. Is this thing a method, an object? Just I want to know because I
Mhm.
want to learn
Yeah.
along with you. And it did that really well for the first few prompts. And I said that, thank you, you're really helping me. And then it just stopped doing it. And I forgot about it. I was like, just yes, yes, yes. And then I had to say to it, like, hey, what's going on? Like we're in agreement over here. Like you would explain every single line of code to me.
Yeah.
So you do have to get it back on.
Did it come up with an excuse?
Um, I don't think it did actually. No,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it didn't come up with an excuse. It was just like, I could probably check, but it was just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Here
no,
we go.
that I've never seen it like explain what,
Yeah.
like, say why or whatever. It would be sort of funny if it did. Oh, sorry, I was distracted. I was thinking about my I have to go pick up my kids.
That would be funny. It'd be frustrating, but funny. I'm gonna have to try that. I wonder if I can try the Judge
Mhm. It's hard to
LLM
do in
part.
the existing tools.
Mm,
And I think this is where one of the things is if this works, it's something that's hard to do in the existing tools that could be really valuable.
yeah.
Um, and it's also one of the areas where potentially this is where the local LLM actually comes into play first. So you can envision like we're using Claude or Anthropic or OpenAI code to do the majority of the work, but
Mhm.
that's through an application that's running on your computer that's generating the code that's doing, and then but there's another model running locally that is has core rules built into it that's checking the output from the server communication and keeping things on track. The other
Mm,
idea I have is even if we don't do a local model doing that, there's no reason why we can't use like OpenAI and Claude and have basically Claude watch OpenAI or vice versa.
yeah.
Um, but that's why it's hard to do in multiple tools because the multiple in the existing tools. So if you're using Claude Code, you can't have you can't have another thread that's checking the work of the
Yeah.
first thread. That's not a thing that's happening. But because we're going to be coding this from scratch, we can do that. We can basically open up two conversations and have them and coordinate one monitoring the other.
And what are you building this in? Is that a silly question? Because you
We haven't
mentioned
touched any code yet, but what I expect is that we're going to use Ruby, um, and it'll probably be a UI, maybe an Electron app or something.
to have
Uh,
a separate back end and separate front end.
there will have to be a separate backend in so much as we're going to be running containers and spinning up containers and that kind of thing. Um, so there's also like some really cool like Ruby bindings for Uh, so Rust is really popular, is gaining popularity right now as a language for doing command line stuff and for doing UIs and stuff like that. And there are some Ruby bindings for that. We could also just use Rust directly, but I've never written in Rust before, so
Hmm.
I don't know if we'll do that. But what I envision ultimately is, in terms of what a user sees, is window pops up on their computer. They have the conversation and prompting and everything on one side, and then an embedded browser which is showing the application in real time that's being built
Okay.
on the other side of the window.
Got it. But the Electron app,
Is
that
just a
input,
wrapper around that.
but is that hitting an API to a Ruby on Rails backend, which is then doing all the heavy lifting to, let's say, go and talk to different AI tools?
Perhaps it might just be a Ruby program running on the computer. I don't know that it'll be a
Okay.
full Rails app.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
I'm not even sure that that's the MVP. The MVP might be a command line application that you're talking into, like Claude Code, and a port you can go to in your browser that shows you the application.
That's cool. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing where it gets to.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think that this could fail, which is good.
Yeah.
It's good to work on something that's not safe, and we'll see where it goes.
How long has this? We're wrapping up. We are going to wrap up. But how long has this idea been brewing? So is this one of these ideas where it popped into your head and you were like, yes, or is this something which has been brewing for a long time?
No, this has been brewing for months. There's been a card in our backlog on Space Station. Space Station is the team of people at thoughtbot that happen to not be on client work on a week to week basis. We do thoughtbot stuff. We do our website. We maintain our stuff. We create things. And so there's been a card where people have been sort of noodling on this idea for months. And
Yeah.
um, I've been trying to find a product. I really like doing AI in focus, but coming up with a new idea every week, organizing what we're going to work on, finding a guest, uh, it's a little tough to do on a weekly basis, and then to go on a stream and code for 90 minutes on something meaningful. So I've been wanting to find a product idea that we could take to the show to provide a through line for uh, the topics for the show. And so there were a couple of product ideas in the backlog that I felt like were promising. So going into this new year, I went over both of the ideas. I chatted with the people who were also working on the ideas, and we sort of brought it one step further in terms of what we could actually build. And I decided that this was the most promising one for both content for the show, but also like something meaningful that potentially has commercialization possibilities.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that, when it eventually kind of floats on the stock exchange, they'll look back to this episode as the genesis of it all. You'll ring that bell, and then they'll come back here and they'll say this is where it started.
Well, hopefully you'll be standing right beside me, the two of you.
I plan to have been up there multiple times by the time this product makes it. So yeah, with my theme park app and everything else in between. Shout out to God.
I do think what's going to help us create, I just envision, because we are developers, right? And we're going to create, like, this tool is going to we'll be working in a Git repo on a Rails app running on our computers. So we're going to be able to use it in the next, as soon as it's somewhat ready, we'll be able to
Yeah.
use it in the next design sprint that we run. And we run multiple design sprints a month in the next across the company. We'll be able to use it. And when it's not doing something the way that we need, we'll just be able to drop down into our editor and Claude Code and be like, okay, we're not blocked. We're just doing it by hand. right?
Yeah.
What we would have normally done.
And then create a
So
card as well. So it's like
yeah,
instant feedback for the
exactly.
development
And
team.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And we'll be able to make it better for next time. And I think that leaves me feeling like, oh, this is something that not only can we use, but that we can have that cycle of we're using it enough and learning from it to make it actually better, which, to bring it all the way back around, has been the distinguishing factor of what has made certain products that we've created more successful than others.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like a great place to wrap it up.
It does. It does. Let's wrap it up.
Well, you can find links to the show AI in Focus, which is the YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitch streaming show that I do on a weekly basis, along with, we'll update the notes once this repository and this product actually exists, at podcast.thoughtbot.com or giantrobots.fm. Either one works. I'm doing this from memory. That about does it for today. I'm Chad Pytel. You can follow me at cpytel@thoughtbot.social.
You can find me on LinkedIn at Will Larry.
And you can find me at sammybirnbaum.com. And if you've been enjoying the swag that I'm wearing, as I am the official ThoughtBot model, head over to the ThoughtBot swag shop, which we'll put in the... Oh, you do? There we go.
Wow.
So we have some of these available. We'll put a link, because I get stopped a lot on the street like, oh, wow, that's unbelievable what you're wearing. So we'll put a link to the ThoughtBot swag shop in the podcast description. You can head over to the shop and look like me or Chad.
This podcast is brought to you by thoughtbot. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.